everybody. Welcome back to the Underwater Photography Show. As always, I am Matthew Sullivan.
And I'm Alex Mustard.
And today we have another Behind the Shot, I think we're calling Behind the Shot series.
Yeah, I think we're up to number 6.
Oh, 6. I missed a couple. All right, and today Alex chose a few of mine, so we're going to get on into them.
Yeah, we're going to dive into some freshwater first of all. Just let me try and bring the picture up. There we go. So the first shot, I'm guessing, is local freshwater to you, with these either small or largemouth bass. I always struggle to remember which one. I think they're smallmouth, but even though it's got a large mouth, bass, which are up to something, but I'm not completely sure what.
Yeah, so these are a pair of largemouth bass. The male is in the front and the female is in the back. And it's at a spring in Florida, a really, really nice one, actually, which is cool to see some healthy ones with a ton of fish and no algae from runoff or anything like that. I was there with our mutual friend Isaac, and we were there for the whole day. And at the very end of the day, we'd been watching this male bass off and on, and he had made this nest. They kind of just fan out a spot on the bottom, clear it out of sticks and rocks and debris and all that kind of thing. Isaac actually found an arrowhead in one of the bass nests that it had uncovered, which was pretty cool. So at the end of the day, the sun was going down. We had this guy clearing out the nest again, and he had finally attracted the attention of a female. So she's the big one in the back of the image there. I'm pointing at my screen as if anybody can see what I'm looking at. But
if you point so that she's in the way, I'm pointing to
her. She's carefully observing his nest cleaning abilities to see if he might be worth mating with. And they did a bunch of like mating rituals and dances and things like that, but we never got to see them actually spawn that day. We stayed as late as we could, but the springs, a lot of them close at night, so you have to get out. But the light levels were really dark, so if I wanted to slow the shutter down, so I could bleed in some of the background, and so you could see the female. Because she was far enough back there that if I had done a normal shutter speed image, she would have probably been too dark and not really shown up. And I like the fact that with the slow shutter, you can get a lot of the action of what the male is actually doing. So you can see the dust flying from the nest where he's cleaning it out with his tail. And I think it was a fourth of a second for this one. So a very slow shutter speed, which goes back to the shutter speed video we just made a couple last week or the week before, so go watch that too. But yeah, it was the bass when they're spawning and when they're guarding their fry, they're very approachable because they're territorial, or they don't care because they're interested in mating. Trying to get close to them any other time is an exercise in frustration, and they are much more skittish when they're not on a nest.
Yeah, I've photographed them on a nest, and was surprised how I was able to photograph them very easily. And then the next time I went back to Florida, they weren't nesting, and I was like, "Wait, I got all these shots really easily last time," but I didn't understand why. One thing I was going to say about the slow shutter speed is actually today I was looking online, and recently the Wildlife Photographer of the Year shared one of Isaac's pictures on their social media, and some Italian friends of mine were debating the picture, and they were saying, one of them was saying one of the things they really liked about the slow shutter speed is it created these kind of shadows around the fish that gave the image quite a three-dimensional feel to it. So that's kind of, we didn't talk about that in the slow shutter speed episode, but sometimes you get these kind of lucky effects almost, which actually can really enhance the look of an image. And so no one goes in sort of going, "Oh, I want to get a bit of a fish shadow and create a three-dimensional effect." But they thought that was really effective in that shot. The other thing I was going to ask you is, when you're in the spring, like all day, like that, how thick a wetsuit are you wearing? Are you 7mm and gloves and hood and all that? Or?
So that day I was wearing a 3mm open cell.
Wow.
It's kind of a
top and bottom.
No, what's that?
Like how high? Like, is it 2-piece 3mm?
Yeah. So that keeps you warm-ish for a while. But I think that day we were in the water for like 7 hours, and the air wasn't warm either. Because I think it was early March, so it definitely gets cold, and I had to take a couple breaks to get out and warm up. Isaac's a machine. he only came out to have a snack or two, and then he was going right back in. Um,
I
but
actually have no idea what Isaac looks like. Because the only photo of him online is like a picture of him in his face mask. So
yep, yep.
I could meet him and have no clue who he was. Which I'm sure is the
um,
way he likes it. So
yeah, probably. But yeah, so it does get cold. I either wear an open cell, a thicker open cell, or I'll wear a 7 whenever I'm in the Springs.
yeah,
Just because 72-degree water might not sound cold, but when you're in there for hours
mm,
and the air is cold, it does eventually gets to you.
yeah.
Um,
I've got a
but
couple in Florida sometimes. So
when there's a lot to shoot, though, you just kind of, you're distracted and you don't pay attention to it as much. It's when you're swimming around looking at nothing, that the cold sets in a little bit. But
mm,
um, yeah, one of my favorite environments to shoot in, and that was my first time getting to photograph bass, so that was cool as well.
yeah, very cool. Right, let's move on to the second image, which I'm less keen to swap places with you for. And tell us about this gator. I presume it's
Yeah, let me pull up the image real quick so I can have it fresh.
yeah.
Here it is. Cool. Yeah, so I've wanted to photograph alligators for a very long time in the water, and have found it way more difficult than I ever would have anticipated. Because a lot of the places down here are where you find them easily are, mucky, murky ponds or lakes where there's no way you can safely get in the water.
Yeah, you need space.
And then the few places that have clear-ish water, they're actually way more skittish than I had ever anticipated. So the second there's places in Florida where they're used to people because they get fed and they just see people, they see thousands of people a day. And those ones are not ones I would want to get in the water with because being used to people, they might have, and especially if they've associated people with food, it's probably not the safest situation. However, all the ones that I've tried to get in the water with previously in other places, the second you step in the water, no matter how close you are, they're gone. They just take off. And I'm not going to go try to follow them. So this is my friend Josh and I. It's Dive and Seek on Instagram. If anybody wants to go take a look at his stuff, he actually has this exact same picture of me as well. But we went down to an area in South Florida that is loaded with alligators. I've been there, I don't know how many times. Josh has been there with me a couple times to try to photograph them, and it's never gone well because they're so skittish. And most of the alligators you see down there are in the 6 to 8 foot range. So we were for probably 3 or 4 hours driving this one long road through this park, hadn't found any, or we had found some, but as soon as you try to get close or as soon as you step in the water, they take off, and it's not worth trying to find them. So we were further into this wilderness than I've ever been before, and we finally found a pool on the side of the road that had gar, and there was this huge alligator sitting up on the far bank of this little pool. So I was like, all right, chances are she's going to bolt as soon as we try to get in the water, but at least there's gar around. We can photograph them instead. So I suited up. I took a step into the water, and immediately she just disappeared. And I'm like, I wasn't going to go find her. I was like, we still have gar here. So I told Josh, I was like, all right, I'm going to hop in the water, and I'm going to swim around the pool to make sure she's actually gone, and then we can photograph the gar without worrying about her, because you don't want to be in there and then have her sneak up on you.
Yeah, I was going to ask all about this, but yeah.
So I swam around, and there was an overhanging tree, which you can see is causing the shadow in the background here. And it was really dark. So it was towards the end of the day. The sun was getting low. And I peek under this tree, and I dive down a little bit just to make sure she's not in there. And I see her tail pointed away from me. So like, all right, she's in here, but she's on the far side of the pool. She's facing the other way. If one of us keeps watch, maybe we can still take turns photographing the gar and just keep an eye on her to make sure she doesn't go anywhere. So I tell that to Josh. He's like, okay, cool. And I put my face back in the water and dive down to look at her, just to look at her tail again, because this is the closest I've ever managed to be to an alligator in the water. And then I realized that her tail is facing the other way, but she has turned and is looped around, and her face is right next to her tail, and she's just sitting there staring at me. And I hadn't seen her move. I didn't notice her face the first time, and she had just casually turned around and was staring right at me. And I've been in the water with a lot of sharks a lot of times. This was way more intimidating and
I
nerve-wracking than
can't
any
imagine.
shark encounter. So I called to Josh, like, please come get in the water. She's turning around facing at me. I don't want to be in here by myself. And Josh normally is one of those people he's like, I'm doing it. I'll go first. He's, no concept of self-preservation. Um, so he gets in the water, but we're standing there up on this raised bank trying to pep talk each other into somebody else going first to take pictures to see how she's going to react. Um, and after probably 15 minutes, I was like, all right, well, we're standing here. It's cold. We have to, we're here. We may as well try. So I dove down. I slowly, slowly, slowly inched as close as I possibly could that I felt safe, and she never budged. So I came up and I was like, all right, she seems chill. I'm going to try it again. And then for an hour, we were in the water with her, and she never budged. She blew bubbles one time, and other than that, never moved. She was probably about 11 to 12 feet, so she was big. Her head there is probably 3 to 4 feet long.
Wow.
And then I'm assuming female just based on I don't know why I'm assuming that, but
It looks
I
like a
kept calling
girl.
her a she. But it was the whole time my heart's doing this in my chest, but she was a sweetheart. And then as soon as we got out of the water and looked down at where she had been, couldn't see her. So it's wild that such a massive animal is in maybe 4.5 feet of water, and you would never know she was there unless you had seen her end up in that spot.
Yeah.
And my little sea frogs housing and 13 millimeter at that point did not feel like an adequate
Yeah, you need a
barrier
big
between she and I.
housing.
But yeah, she was amazing, and it was one of the best wildlife experiences of 2023 and probably ever underwater.
Mm.
And I just like this image just because, it's cool to have one of my best friends in it, and you get a little bit of scale. I know there's some forced perspective there because she's closer than he is, but she was huge, and it was a really cool thing to share space with something that's been around for, I don't know what, 300 million years, and she
And
just sat there.
how deep is she below the surface? Like,
Maybe 5, 6 feet of water.
yeah, wow. Oh
Um,
gosh.
but yeah,
I tell you, I don't think I'd have been on the bank talking about going in. Or, I
she
mean, and was the water that brown before you
yes.
guys went in?
Yeah. Uh,
Because that is
it's
a pretty scary experience. So.
it's not clear. So people see them in the spring sometimes because the small ones especially will go into the springs in the winter. Um, but I've only seen real small ones in there, like 5, 6 feet.
Mm.
Uh, so I would love to see a bigger one in the clear water.
Yeah.
Seeing her in this water was very intimidating.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But we lived through it and got some cool pictures, so it was worth it. But
Mm.
I'm not. Now that I've done it, I don't know how readily I would do it again. It's like skydiving. I've gone skydiving once, and it was amazing, but I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would do it again.
Pole
Um,
cam next time.
yeah, yeah. But it was an amazing experience to be in the water with her, and one I will not soon forget.
Oh, amazing, amazing. I've got nothing to ask photographic. It's all just an experience. Oh, just, yeah. I mean, just the way she's looking. I mean, I'm amazed that. I mean, I know she's not doing anything, but that's also a long time to be underwater without breathing. Given that you
So
kind of went there without like saying, "I'm going here for a few hours."
I asked a friend who does a lot of work with them, and he told me that they can hold their breath for up to 8 hours
Mm.
if they're not doing anything, which is crazy. I assumed it would be like, maybe 45 minutes or so they could hold their breath.
Yeah.
He's like, no, they'll be down there half a day if they're not moving because they're not burning any energy, so they barely breathe. They barely need to breathe anyway, and they're not. But pretty they're remarkable animals. They're super common here, obviously, but getting to see one in the water is such a novel experience that it was really really cool.
Yeah. Oof, very cool. Right, I'm going to move us on to the final of the three. It's going to have to go some to top that story, but photographically, I think this last one is very interesting, and for me as well, very you. Um, so Not the look, but the subject and the look of the photograph, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
frogfish favorite, but
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, no, I was gonna say just striated frogfish. I presume from Blue Heron Bridge area,
Yep. Um,
and yeah, very handsome individual. But yeah, just brought alive by that lighting.
so we get the regular hairy looking striatids here, and we get the black ones, and typically those are the only colors people see because those are the ones that are found in the more dived areas.
Mm.
But there's a couple areas here that you can get colorful ones, and I actually haven't seen any colorful ones this year. This was 2021, I believe, and we did 2021 and 2022. I found orange, red, yellow, pink, all sorts of really cool colored ones.
Mm.
This was the first one, the first colorful one we found after moving to Florida. Found it on a night dive, and then it hung out in roughly the same area for 6 or 7 months. It's really, really mucky over there. It's not like normal sand or rubble or seagrass. Like it's that heavy silt.
Yeah.
So visibility is always bad over there, but there's some really cool stuff. And this frogfish in particular was every time we found her, she was an amazing subject. And this is actually from our first visit with her, and her where she was found was not aesthetically pleasing. The water's brown and gross and gray. So the best way to photograph them, especially if you don't want a ton of backscatter over there, which normally there is, was just the harshest, most angular lighting I could find. So I had two retrostrobes. I had the snoot coming in from her face, and then just a strobe with reduction ring coming in on her body. So her body is the softer light, and then the snoot kind of highlights her from the left-hand side. So it's not actually a difficult shot to do. She's just in between the two light sources.
No, it's really, but it's. I mean, I think this is what I've just been running macro workshops, and I think photographers, I think a common mistake in macro photography now is kind of wanting to throw the box of tricks at every subject without thinking whether that box of tricks is saying anything important or interesting about that subject. It's just like,
Yeah.
I've got this trick. If this thing will stay still, I'm doing my trick. And I do that as much as anyone. But what I think the best macro photography is where there's something that also really speaks to the subject. And I think the lighting here just feels like a studio shot. It's brought out the hairiness, it's brought out the texture and shapes in the frogfish so well. And I think here it's, people might say, it's a snoot. I mean, a lot of macro, it's like, I've got a snoot and I want the world to know I used a snoot. This
Yeah.
for me is using a snoot to create a visually powerful portrait. And to the average underwater photographer, that's not a snoot shot because it's not
Yeah,
a
yeah.
single beam of spotlight that everyone associates with the snoot. It's using it as a creative tool. And I find a photo like this more creatively interesting than so-called creative macro, where it's who's got the biggest toy box. And so I think this is it's a really classy shot for me. So very nice.
And I sat with this. The one thing I wish it had done for me, which it never did, in all the times I visited it, I never saw it put its lure out. I had to have seen this fish, 15 times over the course of the time she was there. Never once saw her throw the lure, but I did watch her eat. She just hoovered up a big herring one day without ever tossing the lure. Just swam in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and she bang just got it. But one of the other things I like to, and we could have a whole discussion on this, is revisiting subjects.
Yeah.
Because it allows you to do so many different things with the same individual or the same type of subject. So I have a whole portfolio of pictures just of her, wide angle, natural light, the studio type image. This is my favorite one, but I think that's another discussion we could have, is revisiting subjects over and over and trying new things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that underwater photographers who have local diving have that benefit of. You maybe don't get
Yeah.
so many subjects and so many different subjects as someone who travels widely and goes to a different dive site every dive of the trip. But when you start to dive a particular site 20, 30, 40 times, and ultimately you get presented quite regularly with the same subjects again and again. It's very good for your photography because it forces you to want to experiment, and also it makes you realize how many ways there are to shoot a frogfish, or what it is. And actually, you can end up with a very diverse set of images as a result. So I think it's good for people to have a local dive site. Or if they don't have diving where they live, at least say a destination where they go a lot, and then there's a particular shore dive or a particular boat dive that they kind of do 2 or 3 times on every trip, and that
Yeah.
becomes their kind of local site. Because I think it is really good for you as a photographer.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap this one up.
Yeah, I'll just bring us back on full screen with the press of a button.
So unless there's anything else, we will see you guys in the next one, and thank you all for watching.